It starts with today is going to be a great day. Soon as my feet hit the floor, I say to myself, today is going to be a great day. That way, my unconscious mind begins to search the day. And it's like, well, what am I looking to? I get to talk to you today. That was one of the first things I thought about.
Hey everybody, Dr. Axe here. Welcome to the show. This week I have a friend of mine on, Dr. Daniel Amen. And Dr. Amen is a medical doctor. He is a former U.S. Army infantry medic. He's a physician, a double board certified psychiatrist. And listen to this, a 12-time New York Times best-selling author, and he's the founder and CEO of the Amen Clinics with 9 locations all across the United States. And, you know, one of the things that's so impressive about Dr. Amen is how he really looks at the brain and takes a holistic approach to healing, helping people heal their emotions, their mindset, of course, doing some incredible things with diet and supplementation. But one of the things I love about him as well is that he's just such a gifted teacher. He takes really complex matters, makes them simplistic. And today we're going to get into how to heal our brain, how to heal our emotions, how to overcome addiction, and so much more. Dr. Amen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh, so great to see you again.
Well, I know, I've been a big fan of yours for years. I know that my mom texted me not long ago and said, hey, I'm watching, Dr. Amen on PBS. And I know you have your PBS specials, which have done so well and are so informative to people and helping them transform their lives. But I'm so excited. You've got a new book out, and it's called Your Brain is Always Listening. So I want to dive into today, talk about the new book, and also get into how people can experience breakthroughs in their health. But first off, I'd love for you to just dive in and talk about why did you write this book and why now?
Well, it's funny. I had actually finished the book before the pandemic started, but I had to go back and revise it. Your brain is always listening to your emotional issues from the past. Your brain is always listening to the food you eat, to your gut microbiome, to the news you listen to. And I really wanted to help people get control over their brain with this book. And while I was writing it, I began to think about the dragons that just breathe fire on our emotional brains. And so the subtitle is Tame the Hidden Dragons that Control Your Happiness, Habits, and Hang-Ups. And it's divided into 5 parts. And the first part has just been so popular. It's about learning about the dragons from the past that still breathe fire on your emotional brain. And there's 13 of them. And my favorite dragon is called the Ancestral Dragon, where the issues you have, they're not your issues. They're your mom's issues, or they're your grandfather's issues. And understanding this whole concept of epigenetics that Tana, who you've met, my wife, her grandmother grew up in Lebanon during World War I when there was a great famine. And she'd actually got lost in the mountains for 3 days. And that trauma wrote in her genes the need for security, and deprivation is coming. So why, when the pandemic hit, did Tana already have a pandemic room? It's because she had been preparing for it for 3 generations. And so knowing your family history really can give you great insight into why you might be struggling.
Wow. I mean, I think this is powerful stuff. I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is how we've had things happen to us in the past and how that holds us back. I mean, how many people I know have we cared for over the years, Dr. Amen, who they even will change their diet, right? They'll change some supplements, they'll start exercising, and they're still not seeing a complete breakthrough in certain areas of their health because how the mind and emotions are really affecting the physical body, right?
No question about it. Another one of the dragons, the most common dragon, is the anxious dragon. And we're all wired to be a bit anxious. It actually helped us survive thousands of years ago. But if you grew up in an unpredictable environment, it literally heightens your limbic or your emotional brain, and you're always doing things to calm it down. And the problem is sugar works to calm it down, but it's a feel better fast that definitely won't last. Alcohol works, marijuana works, but ultimately they damage your brain and they make everything else worse. And so it's like, well, how do you tame the anxious dragon? And I have lots of very practical strategies. But for years, I've been using diaphragmatic breathing with my patients. And there's actually a specific rhythm that triggers a parasympathetic or relaxation response. So if you take 3 seconds to breathe in, hold it for a second, and 6 seconds to breathe out, hold it for a second, 11 seconds. Do that 10 times, it'll trigger a relaxation response and tame that anxious dragon.
Wow, I love that. That's great advice. I know deep breathing, some of these exercises have been done in Ayurvedic medicine and other forms of medicine for a long time to help calm the body and help the body heal. Walk me through this. What are some of the things people can do? I know one of the things that comes up is people have these thoughts, and I know in your book you call them defeating thoughts. What are some of the things that people can start to do to break free of both the things from the past that are affecting us now, discover those, and then also overcome these negative emotions that are sabotaging our success?
Well, so there's a whole chapter in the book on the ants that feed the dragons. So ANT stands for automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that just come into your mind automatically and ruin your day. I actually opened the book with an early story from the pandemic. Miley Cyrus has been a patient of mine for 10 years. And last year she went public with it. And it was March 16th. So everybody remembers March of last year was a disaster. And it was March 16th. It's a Sunday night. She calls me up. She's completely freaked out, like all of the world, about the pandemic and how long will viruses live on packages. And as I walked her back from the ledge, because she knows better. She knows not to believe everything she thinks. So here's the exercise I taught her. Whenever you feel sad or mad or nervous or out of control, write down what you're thinking. And then ask yourself some simple questions like, is it true? Can I absolutely know if this is true? We actually have to take the original thought and turn it to the exact opposite and go, well, is the exact opposite of the thought that's bothering me true? So as I walked her back from the ledge, she said, well, would you go on Instagram with me tomorrow with my 105 million fans and do this? And so she started a whole program called Bright Minded. But everybody is in that dark place. And now more than ever, I wrote down early in the pandemic, mental hygiene is just as important as washing your hands. We need to disinfect our thoughts, kill the ants, tame the dragons that just steal our happiness. And in the book, I talk about 9 different kinds of ants. So different ant species, like all or nothing. Things are all good or they're all bad. And, generally the world is gray. Guilt-beating ants, where you try to motivate yourself with should, must, ought, have to, which just doesn't work. That was actually Miley's big ant. And it's so simple. But what I taught her to do is when you think you should do something, just replace the word should with I want to, or it fits my goals to. And if you don't want to, and it doesn't fit your goals, don't do it. And that was so freeing for her. They're fortune-telling ants, and they drive panic disorders, where you're predicting the worst and then you make it worse still. And I tell people the only people who should be predicting the worst are contract lawyers. They should be protecting you from what's worse. Other than that, Now, I'm not a fan of don't worry, be happy. I'm not a fan of that at all, because that people die early if they have that from accidents and preventable illnesses. But I want you to think accurately. And that simple exercise, whenever you feel sad, mad, nervous, or out of control, write it down, because the act of writing helps you get it out of your head.
I love it. Great advice there. And so I think too, and this is something I don't think a lot of people practice, is taking the time to kind of stop, pause, collect their thoughts and write things down. And then with that, so one of the things you said there, okay, so we want to write down these negative thoughts we're having. Is this a reasonable thought? What are some other actions people can take when they're changing their mindset? Or let's talk about habits now. I think one of the things that happens with so many people is people get into bad habits of a lot of things, of maybe spending all day on the news, right? And wasting their time. What are some of the things that you suggest people do to start to break these bad habits and even create new habits?
Well, I have 10 bad habit dragons in the book. And some of them will surprise you. The first one is the yes, yes, yes bad habit dragon. It's like, no matter what someone asks you to do, you say yes. When I have to teach my patients to go, I have to think about it, because they don't want to disappoint people. They're people pleasers. They end up taking on way too much, and then they become overwhelmed and bitter. And then you'll notice this one too, the no, no, no dragon. That no matter what you say to these people, they argue with you. And you've had patients like that. I certainly have. And my dad was like this. I'm like, why do you always say no? And he's like, oh, I don't do that. And of course he did it. And it actually, there's a certain area of your brain that works too hard. So I get people to notice what's the cue or the trigger. What do they get out of it? And then how to develop a different routine. So there's procrastination, bad habits, disorganization. The worst one, though, and you'll notice this one too, is the oblivious bad habit dragon. These are people, they never read food labels. They never read labels of the lotions and stuff they put on their body. They're just completely oblivious to their health. And with 72% of us overweight, 42% of us obese, it's just the biggest brain drain in the history of the United States. And so getting these dragons tamed, and for each of them, I'm like, okay, what's the cue? What's the reward? And how can you develop a different routine?
I love it. So good. Well, Dr. Amen, share this with me. I would love to hear about you or Tana. Like what are some of the habits you guys have incorporated in your own lives that you think have, man, just been so good for your mind, for your emotions, for your brain? Anything specific you or, Tana may have made do on a regular basis?
Yes. One of the dragons, probably the worst one in the pandemic, is called the hopeless and helpless dragon. And it drives depression and suicide. And they score very high on something we call negativity bias. So it's one of the tests we actually give people at Amen clinics. And so we develop positivity bias training. And the tiny habits are, it starts with, today is going to be a great day. Soon as my feet hit the floor, I say to myself, today is going to be a great day. That way, my unconscious mind begins to search the day. And it's like, well, what am I looking to? I get to talk to you today. That was one of the first things I thought about. As I go through my own, asking myself this question: is this good for my brain or bad for it? That is the most powerful tiny habit. It takes 3 seconds. And if you can answer it with information and love, like I made myself a great shake this morning, I'm so happy. If you can answer it with information and love, you begin to just do the right things. And before I go to bed at night, I say a prayer, and then I go, what went well today? And it's been such an important habit for me. It's like a little treasure hunt and I like to look for micro moments. What's the smallest thing that happened today that made me happy? So I figured out how to make a brain healthy hot chocolate. And so just the first sip of that always makes me happy. But let me show you how powerful this can be. My mom and dad both got COVID at the beginning of the pandemic, and they were both hospitalized. I put them on hydroxychloroquine because that's what we knew at the time might be helpful. My mom immediately got better. My dad, not so much, but they both got out of the hospital after 5 days. They made the front page of the Orange County Register. And it was just a great story, except my dad just, I guess you could call it long COVID. And he was tired, he was coughing. He just wasn't getting better. And it was on May 5th, I was on my way to take him to the pulmonologist because he wasn't getting better. And my mom called me and told me he stopped breathing. And the rest of the day was terrible because the day my dad died. And that night, when I went to bed, because it's my habit, I said a prayer and then I went, what went well today? And then my brain stopped. And it's like, seriously, you're going to do that today? But it's my habit, right? People do their habits. And my mind went to the interaction between my mom and the police officer. I've been doing a program with the Newport Beach Police Department creating brain healthy police officers. And one of my students was the police officer on the scene. And the interaction between him and my mom, he was so sweet. And they said they had to do an investigation because somebody died at home. And she goes, do you think I was cheating on him? So even in that moment, there was this levity. And then I just got hundreds of texts from my friends and his friends. And I remember sitting with my dad before the coroner took him away and just holding his hand and remembered how soft it was. And then I just went to sleep on a night I usually wouldn't have slept. And these habits can help you through really hard times. You just want to put good ones in because if you put bad habits, your brain will continue to do it. The brain does not like change, which is why we call these tiny habits, smallest thing you can do today that will make the biggest difference.
I love it. I mean, what a fantastic habit. It's sort of that practice of gratitude too, just starting off. I mean, this is going to be a great day. I'm going to start doing that. I love that mindset. I love it. Let's talk about food a little bit. One of the things I know you always cover is you cover some amazing food tips for people. And as we're talking about this, how do foods affect our emotions and our mood? And what are some of the best foods for supporting our mental health?
So food is information, and your brain is always listening to what you put in your body. So I call the weapons of mass destruction, highly processed, pesticide sprayed, high glycemic, low fiber, food-like substances stored in plastic containers. This is what's killing literally the soul of America. And I want people to be much more intentional. And people go, but I love pizza, or I love Rocky Road ice cream, or I love pasta. The question I always have is, does it love you back? And I don't know, Josh, if you've ever been in a bad relationship. I have been in bad relationships in the past. I was married for 20 years to someone who really didn't like me very much. And I mean, it was terrible. And I told myself, I'm only going to love people now who love me back. And, I'm so grateful for Tana because we have a great relationship. Well, I'm damn sure not going to do it with food, to have a bad relationship with food. And I tell this story, and your brain is always listening, of my nephew who has Tourette syndrome, which is a tic disorder. People have both motor and vocal tics. And I hadn't seen him for a couple of years. And when I went to visit, and I'm like, he's got flat out Tourette syndrome. Now, most of my colleagues would have put him on an antipsychotic or clonidine or something like that. And I'm like, if he was my child, first thing I'd do is put him on an elimination diet. I'd eliminate gluten, corn, dairy, soy, artificial dyes, and sweeteners. And the parents did that. And his tics, 95% of them went away.
Wow.
And the next time I saw him, I'm like, how's it going? I don't like any of the foods I have to eat. And he was going to stay with me for 4 days. I'm like, so our job now is to find 20 foods you love that love you back. And after 4 days, we actually found 42 of them. I actually took him to Whole Foods. We went down each aisle. Okay, which foods do you love? And Whole Foods has a lot of crap in it too. So you have to still be thoughtful. So after 4 days, we found 42 foods. Now we're up to 140 foods. And there's just not an issue because people don't understand. If you can just get your brain to shift to something new, there are literally thousands of foods that are good for you that you will love. And you just basically have to find 20. And so I'm like a huge fan of berries. I have a sweet tooth. I love frozen blueberries. And so most days I have a cup of frozen, it's sort of like dessert for me. And they're good for you. They're loaded with phytonutrients and fiber. So blueberries, salmon. And for me, I didn't really like salmon until I found Copper River salmon, which runs only a certain time. Love Copper River salmon. And often it's in the preparation of it, green leafy vegetables. There is a linear correlation. Think of that, a linear correlation between the number of fruits and vegetables you eat a day and your level of happiness up to the number 8. So food can cause depression. Food can eliminate depression. I have this one great story of a guy who was very depressed, been suicidal, had 3 courses of electroconvulsive therapy or ECT, failed multiple medications. And we're like, you should do an elimination diet. And he's like, oh, that won't work. I'm like, oh, great. You think we're idiots. Do an elimination diet. And he did. And within 3 weeks, he's better. And so after we do it, we then added back gluten. Nothing happened. Added back dairy. Nothing happened. Added back corn. Within 20 minutes, he had a vision of a gun in his mouth pulling the trigger. So I had to break up with corn. You don't know what your body might be sensitive to. Almost all the corn in the United States is genetically modified. It's all raised with pesticides. This is not a health food.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's powerful to think about what one food wrong in your diet or a few wrong foods, what that can do to our mental state, to our gut microbiome, to our entire body. It's incredible. You know, one of the other things I know too that you really get into your book is healing addictions. I know addictions are such a big thing, Dr. Amen, whether it's being addicted to a drug, sugar, lots of other addictions. What are some of the ways that you talk about healing addictions in your new book, Your Brain is Always Listening?
You know, addictions were skyrocketing before the pandemic. Everybody knows about the hundreds of deaths a day from the opiate epidemic. One of my friends lost her 16-year-old son recently, got Xanax on Snapchat that was laced with fentanyl. It was just horrifying what is happening. And the typical 12-step model, Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Sex Addiction Anonymous, it was based on principles from 85 years ago. There is literally no neuroscience in the 12-step program. Now, the 12 steps have helped a lot of people, but I wanted to reimagine them as a neuroscientist. And the typical 12 steps starts with, my life is out of control. Well, I actually like to start with the step before then, which is, what do you want? What are your goals? I have an exercise in the book called the one-page miracle. On one piece of paper, write it out. What do you want? Your relationships, your work, your money, your physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And then you ask yourself every day, is my behavior getting me what I want? So with Tana, I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship. I always want that. I don't always feel like that. But if I know what I want, then I can inhibit the behaviors that don't get me what I want. So it's not that I shouldn't be mean to her. I mean, of course I shouldn't be mean to her, but it clearly doesn't fit the goals I have for myself. So that's step number one. Step number two is know when the dragon has been hijacked. Know when your behavior is not getting you what you want. And step three, completely new for the 12 steps, get your brain right. So know what helps it, know what hurts it, and work on rehabilitating it. Because almost all the addicts that we see have damaged or toxic looking brain. And if you've ever been to an addiction treatment center, they generally feed them like crap. They don't allow them the proper time to sleep and exercise. They don't do anything generally with nutritional supplements. And step three is really, you have to get your brain right. And four is about forgiveness, because what I talk about in the book is your behavior is way more complicated than most people think. I was on Dr. Phil yesterday. This guy had the most unusual sex addiction. He was addicted to hiring women to hurt him. Literally, punch him, throw up on him, run him over with the car. And you just basically think of it like cutters. You know, why would people do anything to damage themselves? So on the surface, it seems crazy. But he was an Iraqi veteran, actually got blown up, lost his right arm, and you could just see the damage in his brain. So easy to call him bad, harder to go, why? And so forgiveness is so important. Step five, it's all addicts aren't the same. Know your addict brain type. So they're impulsive addicts, compulsive addicts, sad addicts, anxious addicts, addicts from head trauma. So I have a quiz to help people know their type. And then, you know, there's a step on getting the craving dragon under control. Did you know if you go too long between meals, your blood sugar drops and you're more vulnerable to relapse? If you don't get 7 hours at night of sleep, you're more vulnerable to relapse. And so I talk about the cues and really a whole relapse prevention program. And so I'm really excited because at Amen Clinics, I have 9 clinics around the country. We see a lot of people who are struggling with addiction. And so I think this new program can really help them.
I love it. Hey, I want to encourage everybody, hey, check out Dr. Amen's new book. We're going to keep going with a few more questions, but I love that there's a quiz in there, Dr. Amen, that people can take to really learn more about themselves and some actions that they need to take. So guys, you can run out to bookstores nationwide. The book is Your Brain is Always Listening. You can also just go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, search Daniel Amen, Your Brain is Always Listening, or just search Dr. Daniel Amen. He's got so many great books, but you'll see that book there, Your Brain is Always Listening. Well, Doc, one of the other things I know that you do as a physician is you prescribe things, and specifically you prescribe a lot of nutrients and vitamins and supplements and herbs and those sort of things for people who really need support for their brain, but mood. Are there any particular nutrients that are good for helping people rewire their brain or helping their brain in this process as they look at overcoming addiction and generally just having a healthier mindset?
Well, actually, if people pre-order the book and then go to yourbrainisalwayslistening.com, I have 4 free gifts for them.
Wow.
And one of them is a coupon for free bottle of my favorite supplement called Happy Saffron. And I created Happy Saffron after I read the research on saffron, zinc, and curcumins. And all of them have scientific evidence that they can support your mood. In fact, for saffron, there are 21 randomized controlled trials showing that 30 milligrams of purified saffron is as effective as Prozac, Zoloft, Effexor, Lexapro, imipramine for treating depression. But as opposed to the SSRIs, which decrease your sexual function, make it harder to have an orgasm, decrease your libido, saffron in a number of studies has actually been found to be pro-sexual. And one of our first reviews for Happy Saffron was Viagra for women. And I love that. And when the pandemic started, everybody in my house started taking Happy Saffron because saffron is good. It's been found to be helpful for your eyes. It's been found to decrease inflammation, help your blood sugar. And as I keep reading the benefits of it, I'm like, I love this. So I make sure I never miss it. And, you know, in medical school, I got not one lecture on nutraceuticals or natural supplements to enhance brain and body function. I mean, that's just crazy because we live in a society that has nutrient deficiencies. I published a study on omega-3 fatty acids, looking at the omega-3 index. If it's low, the function and blood flow in your hippocampus is also low. So why does that matter? Well, your hippocampus is the major mood and memory structure in your brain. Hippocampus is Greek for seahorse. And every day you make 700 new stem cells in your hippocampus, one of the few areas of the brain that continues to make new neurons throughout life. So I think of it as you have 700 new baby seahorses every day. If you don't provide them with the nutrients they need, with B6, B12, folate, vitamin D, vitamin C, they're going to shrink. And then your memory is not going to be good. And your mood is not going to be good. And so omega-3 fatty acids, so much research on them for both cognition and mood. A huge fan of getting a really good multiple vitamin. I just think of it as insurance because people go, oh, it's just expensive urine if you have a great diet. It's like, but who has great diets? 90% of the population doesn't eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And in a study we did of 50 consecutive patients looking at their omega-3 index, 49 of them had suboptimal levels. Wow. And so high quality fish oil, multiple vitamin. Then I think everybody should know their vitamin D level. Everybody should, because when it's low, you're more likely to die if you get COVID. You're more likely to get cancer. They looked at people, study from UC San Diego, people who are above 40, so the normal range is 30 to 100, versus those who are under 20. The ones above 40 had half the risk of getting cancer as those who are under 20. So vitamin D, low vitamin D is a universal risk factor for illness. Wow,
it's amazing. Well, Dr. Amen, I have a few other things here just from a lifestyle standpoint, and I want to mention a few other things with your book here. But, I think as we're talking about this, there's so many different things that, people can do to benefit their brain. I know one of the things, and I want to just go over this, some of the stuff you talk about in your book. I know you go over how to overcome pain from your past, how to break bad habits, how to shut down self-defeating thoughts, which happen so frequently, how to shore up your capacity to cope with stress and uncertainty, heal addictions, and reduce your vulnerability to people and practices that are hurting you. Again, these are such powerful things. And I think for a lot of people are in bad relationships. A lot of people are struggling with negative thinking. A lot of people are essentially beating themselves up with feelings of guilt and shame and everything else. What would you say are some of the biggest steps? Where should somebody start? Number one, people need to go get your book. Your brain is always listening. But what are some of the most important first steps people can take to start to heal emotionally and mentally?
So know what you want. It's very important to write it down. All good businesses have business plans and they know what they're going to accomplish this quarter, this year, and 5 years. You want to do that for yourself. And then I think of all of my patients in 4 big circles. Everybody's got a biology. So that's why we look at their brain. That's why getting the physical functioning of your brain healthy is it's foundational. You have to start there. So I think of it like hardware and software. And then once your brain is right, you have to program, is this good for my brain or bad for this? Whenever I feel sad, mad, nervous, or out of control, I'm writing down what I think. I have those positive tiny habits. Today is going to be a great day. So I have to program my mind to get what I want. And then there's this social circle. So I think of it in the computer analogy as network connections. And when my relationships are better, I'm better. And so I focus. There's a brand new, super fun video I did with comedian Laura Cleary and her husband, Stephen Hilton, on Facebook. Go to Laura Cleary's Facebook page, where I did a marital therapy session with them. And you'll hear me talk about, got to get your brains right, both of them. I scanned both of them. Got to get your mind right. We're going to kill the ants. And now be very purposeful on how we treat each other. So she is a lark. She's a morning person. He's an owl. He's a night person. Getting him to respect her so that after dark, he stops bothering her about work stuff. It's absolutely critical, but it's clear you have to start with the same goal, which they have. And then the last circle, because people are never their diagnoses. You know this.
Yeah.
They're always whole, biological, psychological, social, and spiritual, which most practitioners don't want to touch.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, 80% of America has deep-rooted spiritual beliefs, and encouraging them to practice their beliefs and know why they're on the planet. One of the dragons is the death dragon, and it is just breathing fire across the world. I think of it like Godzilla stomping around the world with the pandemic. But if you know why you're here, if you have a sense that your life has meaning and purpose and that it matters, especially to other people, you're just more likely to live longer. And so how you train, my dragon is the abandoned, invisible, and insignificant dragon, because I grew up a middle child of 7. I have 5 sisters. I'm the second son in a Lebanese family, means you are completely not special. And so I have really sought the significance, and that helps tame the dragon. And so in that segment is really knowing your purpose so that you can live a meaningful, purposeful life. It's just absolutely essential. And so I just go, what are you struggling with in each of those 4 circles? And what tiny, simple things can you do? So for example, in the biological circle, is this good for my brain or bad for it? In the psychological circle, if I'm feeling sad, mad, nervous, or out of control, write it down, question it. In the social circle, does it fit? Know what you want in your relationships, and then ask yourself all the time, does it fit? And in the spiritual circle, this one question I love, I live with this question, is does this have eternal value? Because if it doesn't, then maybe I shouldn't put so much energy into it.
Wow, I love it, Dr. Amen. These are fantastic, fantastic thoughts, because as we're talking about, I know that when you and I have taken care of so many patients, and some of the biggest breakthroughs come with diet, but some of the biggest breakthroughs come with spiritual healing, emotional healing, forgiveness, breaking through those addictions and habits. And so much of that, almost all of it, is mindset is such a big part of this. And so I want to encourage everybody, run out and get Dr. Amen's new book. It's called Your Brain is Always Listening. You can go to yourbrainisalwayslistening.com. So again, yourbrainisAlwaysListening.com. And Dr. Amen also has some free gifts on there for you if you get the book, or again, bookstores nationwide, Amazon.com. And Dr. Amen has written 12 New York Times bestselling books. He's a prolific and incredible writer. Again, I've read his books, and the thing I love about him is, Dr. Raymond, you take really complex topics, you make them simple, and then teach us how to implement them into our lives so we can transform. So I want to encourage everybody, check out the new book, Your Brain is Always Listening. Dr. Amen, thanks so much for being a guest on the show today.
Thanks, Josh. I'm so grateful that you helped me spread this message. And I always love when you're on our podcast so we can help amplify your message as well.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everybody for listening. I'll be back next week with another show.
This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed in this podcast are not medical advice and have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. In some cases, individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein.